So first, a little bit about me. I have my credentials listed here, but work with SIG as the VP of Development and Strategic Planning and lead the consulting team there. So we work on many lead projects. We do have done a lot of O&M existing buildings projects, which has been fun to get to know all kinds of different buildings across the U.S. I will go ahead and dive in with materials and resources. All right, so first we start with an image of your prerequisites and credits. And how I like to think of materials and resources is you're looking at what's coming in the building, but not just that, you're looking at what's leaving the building too. So it's kind of the cyclical process that is very common for lead discussions in USGBC guidance. So there are two prerequisites for materials and resources. One is ongoing purchasing and waste policy. The second is facility maintenance and renovation policy. And then there are credits, 5 credits from there that are essentially components of those prerequisites and achieving those components to a further level. So we will dig into that. Looking first at your ongoing purchasing and waste policy. So for your typical credit, there's an establishment component and a performance component. The establishment is a policy, and the performance is either a waste audit at the building or achieving 75% waste diversion at the building. So we'll get into that a little bit in more detail as well. For the establishment component, you've got your EPP plan. So this is your environmentally preferable purchasing plan, and then your solid waste management policy. EPP is definitely a common abbreviation, so be aware of that. And for that plan, you're looking at what are your top 5 most common purchases made for your property. Those are your ongoing purchases. So maybe it's copy paper and notebooks, so on and so forth. Whatever those categories are, it's identifying what they are and listing some goals in that environmentally preferable purchasing plan. You'll also address durable goods, and we're going to go into the definition of those in just a bit. And then you'll look at your ongoing purchases of lamps. The second component of that is your solid waste management policy. So you are looking at, again, those ongoing items that come through your building. So what are the top 5 items that are considered for waste management? You'll also be looking at durable goods and any hazardous types of materials, just putting together a system for managing these things. Your ongoing consumable purchases. So here's a definition of your ongoing consumable. It's a product that has a low cost per unit that's used regularly at the building. So this is just your day-to-day ongoing item that you're going to be using for the property. And you can put priority on products and services that have less or reduced environmental impact. That's really the key factor. That's the whole point of creating this purchasing plan or any type of management plan when it comes to products. How can you reduce environmental impact of those products? So perhaps your categories include office paper, printer cartridges, notebooks, writing tools. Those tend to be really common ones. But you'll also be looking at those more hazardous items like your light bulbs, your batteries, and even your food. A durable good. So this is in contrast to an ongoing consumable. A durable good is a product that has a longer life cycle. So it could be 2 years or more that you use that item. So that's going to be your furniture, that's your office equipment and appliances, TVs, things like that. Whereas your ongoing consumables are things you use on the day-to-day, low cost per item, think copy paper, office supplies, that type of thing. So your durable goods last longer, they're replaced less often, which makes sense. And your durable good waste stream, you want to be fully depreciated. You want to be able to take that good to the end of its useful life and then repurpose it if possible. For your EPP, your environmental preferable purchasing plan, again, you want to make sure that you put priority on any products that have less or reduced environmental impact. You know, when you're looking at other competing types of products or services that do the same thing. You also want to consider the full line of production for the product. Consider where the raw materials come from, the actual manufacturing process. Packaging is a big one. We've all seen, especially in these times, when things are being shipped to us more often perhaps than usual, the packaging for those items can be really important when it comes to environmental impact. Is it a pretty lean packaging, or is there perhaps too much packaging than might be necessary? So packaging is a big component of that. Distribution, so the transportation impact of getting a material from, let's say, manufacturing to your door. And then, of course, the operation and maintenance and disposal of that product service. So you're looking at the entire life cycle. For your solid waste management policy, you definitely want to target and think through those high volume materials, the materials that are coming into your building at a high rate, where you really need to identify the best path for diversion to reduce the environmental impact of those. And you want to establish a diversion goal for each waste stream. So depending on the waste stream that's being considered, there might be a different path for diversion. So we'll get into that as well. And for the performance component of this prerequisite, here are your two options. So the waste stream audit every 5 years, or the 75% diversion of ongoing waste. So here is the first overview of a waste stream audit. So those of you who have done LEED for Existing Building certification at your building may have participated in the waste stream audit. I can say it's very enlightening to participate and see how this works out. But essentially, what you are doing for a waste stream audit is you're looking at the waste that's compiled in your building for a 24-hour period. All that waste is collected and it's sorted. So you're looking at your trash stream and your recycling stream, and it's sorted by material type. So think your paper, your plastic, your glass, so on and so forth. Those easily recyclable materials, and then perhaps organics or electronics. All of those items are sorted in both your waste and your recycling stream. So essentially, at the end of the day, what you find is the amount of waste that was recycled successfully, and then the amount of waste that could have been recycled but was thrown in the trash. So I say it's enlightening because what we found in the past with several different projects, and of course it's unique by location and by individual building, what types of waste are collected, but you'll find that there might be opportunity for improving a process or improving education for waste diversion on certain floors or with certain tenants and groups, or maybe it's an opportunity to identify some new methods for even like drinking glasses rather than using disposable cups, using reusable types of cups for your office space. So a lot of good information comes out of that. But again, your waste stream audit, you're finding what could be recycled and what was recycled. And there's a waste audit report that's documented for that. And this is another image of what this will look like. The waste stream audit report does need to identify several things to be able to comply with the LEED requirements. The timeline, the methodology, so the method for sorting and measuring waste for your waste stream audit, what types of waste were sorted, and then also by weight or volume, what was found? What did you find in the trash stream? What did you find in the recycling stream? You need to be able to identify opportunities for improvement. So where can you decrease waste generation? Source reduction would be great. Source reduction is reducing waste or preventing waste at the source to be able to decrease the amount of waste that becomes later on. And then you also need an analysis of how waste diversion and source reduction could reduce the project's waste hauling costs, because costs are a big component of this too. You can reduce costs, that's great for the building team. For adaptation, any school and hospitalities projects must include food in their waste audit, which is very understandable. So when you've got a school or you've got a restaurant, you know that there's a lot of food going through that type of building. And so including that food in your waste audit is another required component there. And for retail, you have 4 options. You can do a supply chain survey. You can do education program for employees. So really just providing education on what goes where in terms of the recycling program. Supply chain environmental criteria. And then lastly, education program for customers. Okay, so next we are going into our second prerequisite here, which is facility maintenance and renovation policy. Okay, so again, we've got establishment and performance. The first establishment component has your purchasing policy, your waste management policy, and IAQ policy. So it's very robust in terms of establishment, and there's no performance metrics. So this is really sitting down and thinking about what your policies and procedures are going to be for the building. Because this is a prerequisite, no performance, no metrics are required for this. That's where you get into the optional credits later on in this credit category. Maintenance and renovation. So something to point out at the beginning is maintenance is a little different than a renovation, a tenant improvement, or perhaps an addition to your building. So you really want to think about what that facility alteration or addition might be compared to your day-to-day maintenance. You want to look at your typical scale and process for renovations and address smaller maintenance projects separately. So let's say if you have a carpet cleaning, that would be traditional maintenance, whereas a renovation would be you're tearing out all the carpet and drywall in an office, and you're revising the actual structure and reinstalling flooring. That's a renovation. So just to clarify that. So for your purchasing policy, for this particular prerequisite, you are only looking at base building elements. Think of that as permanently installed things in your building. So that would be your drywall, that would be your flooring, that would be your casework, like your built-ins and wall coverings too. Anything that's permanently or semi-permanently installed in the project. FF&E is a very common term in the industry, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but it's furniture and fittings, as well as components and parts that you need to maintain them. Your EPP policy, your environmentally preferable purchase policy, for maintaining renovations, for maintenance and renovations, you are looking at a lot of different things, but you can break it down here. So you're looking at the criteria for the MR credit purchasing, and you're delineating how you as a project team will address those components. So for facility maintenance and renovation for products, materials, and furniture. And then you follow the credit requirements for guidance and the verbiage, but again, you're just establishing the procedure here. You don't necessarily have to measure and be able to provide those metrics until you get to the optional credits. You do want to include your base building elements, your furniture and furnishings, and the components and parts needed to maintain them. You want to be really specific about the criteria and align them with the lead language and the requirements within. And then educate so that any purchasers, including your subcontractors, can learn how to identify what those preferable products are. For your waste management policy, the facility maintenance waste, you're looking at safe storage and recycling of any type of waste associated with both maintenance and renovation in two different components. So you want to, for your renovation waste, describe the procedure for creating an individual plan for each renovation project. The reason for that is because each renovation project has a different scope, or perhaps it's in a different location, uses different materials. So really breaking it down between facility maintenance and renovation and establishing those procedures and best practices. So for each one, you're going to establish waste diversion goals. So what is your percentage diversion goal? Is it 50%? Is it 80%? You want to target 5 materials for diversion, approximate the volume of waste anticipated, and then identify waste diversion strategies to be used. So what that would mean is, okay, if you've got a tenant improvement going on, what are the biggest 5 materials that you expect to collect as waste? Maybe it's wood and carpet and chipboard. and other items as well. And what are you going to do with those particular items? Do you have a facility identified that can accept and recycle those items, so on and so forth. Your waste management policy, you want to define your waste management practices, so your diversion goals. So you're going to have your 5 materials that are going to be most commonly collected as waste for that project. You're going to develop contracts with those particular waste haulers that can accept and divert those products. And you want to make sure that you have a properly sized waste storage area. And that's just saying the waste that's collected at the building, rather than being piled out in the back of the building in a disorganized manner, how can you plan for it and make sure that those materials are stored appropriately so they can successfully be recycled or diverted? Hazardous materials, for any type of maintenance waste, you want to look at dedicated storage items that require special handling. So any types of batteries or lamps sometimes have those special handling storage cases. Identify your waste haulers and ask them what reports they can provide, what their typical practices are in terms of hauling waste and recycling rates. That's always some good questions to ask them. And then lastly, education, making sure that job site workers understand and can participate in that construction waste recycling. Moving to the next policy here is your IAQ policy. So this is looking at, again, facility maintenance waste and renovation waste. What is the IAQ policy for that? You want to have in place an indoor air quality policy for your maintenance and renovation activities, addressing the criteria that we're going to cover over the next couple of slides. The maintenance activities implement the policy as applicable, and for your renovation activities, you're going to have an individual plan, again, for each renovation project, just because renovations are very specific to scope, location, so on and so forth. And you definitely want to follow your SMACNA IAQ guidelines for occupied buildings, and that is definitely a standard you want to remember, but we're going to have that on another slide. Okay, so you want to follow your SMACNA guidelines, which we'll go into detail. And you will have, there is a synergy with another credit in your IAQ section. So even though this IAQ policy is in your materials and resources section, of course, there's a synergy with the IAQ credit as well. So think of that. And then there's an opportunity to have a flush out or air testing at the building. So all of these we'll look at too. SMACNA guidelines. This is a standard to definitely know for your O&M exam. And what you are looking at is minimizing air quality disturbances for the occupants that are coming into the building and ensuring a long-term air quality. So there are 5 different measures that you want to remember. HVAC protection, so keeping any types of contaminants and pollution out of your HVAC system. You don't want to run that permanently installed equipment if possible. And if you do run that equipment, make sure proper filtration is installed. Source control. So this is keeping your contaminants out of the building at the source and eliminate any that are introduced. Pathway interruption. So you just want to prevent any circulation of any dirty or contaminated, dusty air when you're cutting materials or sanding, using any products that have VOCs that are emitting. So just being considerate of what is flowing through the air and what can you isolate and prevent. Housekeeping, so maintaining a clean job site is very important in keeping fewer IAQ contaminants in the first place. So a good example of a very simple housekeeping item would be having maps at the entry and exit for any of the construction sites so that people can walk off the dust that might be on their shoes before they exit. And then scheduling. So you can sequence your construction activities to minimize impact on your air quality. So just making sure that certain things are happening perhaps after hours so that the occupants are not exposed to a lot of dust being in the air, things like that. So here we're looking at the option to either pursue flush out or air quality testing. I would say there are pros and cons to each one, so it's really up to the building team to choose which is the best path. So the flush out is following certain recommendations to do a full building flush out, which is done when the building is completed, when all furniture is installed. So essentially construction is done, furniture moves in, and then the flush out is started. You want to make sure that the mechanical systems can provide the appropriate amount of outside air. And for any systems that can provide a sufficient volume of outside air, you want to make sure that the equipment can handle that additional load. And then using any type of temporary supply and exhaust system. For air quality testing, so this is a little bit different, but it also is a good representation of what's going on, what types of contaminants you have in your air. And this is performed during your construction. You want to, backing up, during construction, you want to use low emitting materials to reduce contaminant load. That's just across the board. For LEED best practices, the more low emitting materials you can source, the better. We all know indoor air quality is very, very important. And so thinking ahead and planning where the sources are and focusing on low emitting materials can help you on various credits for your LEED application, but this is obviously one where it is documented. All right, so you want to test air quality when the HVAC system is operating and under normal conditions. So it's operating as it would on a typical day. The air is tested similarly as possible to what the occupants will be breathing. There are certain contaminants that are tested for this air quality testing, and you have to verify that the contaminant levels are below the thresholds that are identified for LEED. All right, here we're going to the optional credits. So in the following credits, you're going to see a lot of overlap on the items that we discussed for the prerequisites. So again, because the performance metrics are not required for your prerequisites, this is where you have the opportunity to build points and provide that metric data to earn credit. So first, we've got purchasing for ongoing consumables. There's no establishment because you essentially addressed this the verbiage for this credit in your prerequisite. So here you're focusing strictly on performance. You're looking at your ongoing consumables, so your day-to-day things that have low cost per unit, and you're looking at your electric powered equipment. And then of course, food and beverage is included for your schools and hospitality, just because that is something that comes through the building at a high volume. So we are looking at 60% by cost, by total cost, required to be compliant for pursuing this credit. You're looking at your high cost and high volume purchases. You can use the criteria to recommend alternatives for any products that may not fall within the criteria. And then of course, educating tenants about approved purchases and certain qualifications that a product might have can be very helpful as well. So for these credits, you're looking at total dollar amount and then a percentage of that cost needing to be compliant for achievement. So a couple of the criteria that you will be evaluating. So you're looking at post-consumer recycled content, extended use, anything that has extended use, sustainable agriculture, local sourcing of food and beverages, bio-based material, and then paper and wood products. Remember those. Post-consumer recycled content will meet or exceed the levels listed in the EPA Comprehensive Procedure Guidelines, CPG. So you can find more information on their website, but a lot of products you'll find have that CPG certification. You'll see it very commonly on things like paper towels and paper products, perhaps copy paper. And this is a good image to show what post-consumer content is listed for different items. So these are your, this is a great example of a list of ongoing consumables. At the top here, your binders, your clipboards, so on and so forth. So the post-consumer content is the percentage that has been previously used as a component of this new product. And then the recovered materials, that section is slightly different in percentage on some items because it also includes that post-industrial or the pre-consumer content. So it's kind of a combination of post and pre-consumer items. All right, so EPA recommends that under such policies and procedures, agencies procure remanufacturing services for expended cartridges. So certain cartridges you can either mail back for reuse, or perhaps you source cartridges that have been previously used. It's just a really great way to reduce the environmental impact of that product. When it comes to extended use, batteries must be rechargeable. Those are very widely available now. And then your toner cartridges for those big laser printers must be remanufactured. Looking at your sustainable agriculture, these are some food labels that you may be familiar with already. So these are aligned with the sustainable agriculture LEED requirements, or criteria, I should say. So it's not that all of your food has to be USDA organic, it's just looking at the feature of the food and how it can fit into your LEED requirements. A thing to note is local sourcing for LEED is defined as anything that can be sourced, manufactured within 100 miles of the building site. So previous versions, it was 500 miles. You're focusing on 100 miles, which is very close. It can be difficult, but if you're focusing with local farmers and other providers, that's more doable. Bio-based materials are products that are made from any type of natural product. So the Sustainable Agriculture Standards can have more information on what those products might be. All right, so over 40,000 American family forest owners are FSC certified. Definitely know what FSC stands for your exam, Forest Stewardship Council. So you'll see a little glimpse of FSC appear in each of the LEED rating systems. So this is where it's falling in here. FSC is really the gold standard for forest management for LEED. There are certainly other certifications for forests, sustainable forests, but for USGBC, their focus is on FSC certified wood. And the FSC is the only standard to prohibit the use of hazardous chemicals, which are still highly used in some other forests. It's the only standard that requires ecological functions and values remain intact after harvest, so no clear cutting, no clearing an entire field. And it's the only standard that protects old growth and restricts monoculture plantation. So it's really important to focus on biodiversity, and that you're seeing that overlap with the FSC prioritization with LEED. So paper products and wood products can have FSC certification. Sometimes it's a percentage of the component, maybe it's 50% FSC, so on and so forth, but it relates to paper and wood products strictly. All right, so now we're looking at the performance measure for electric powered equipment. This is actually a fairly simple one to pursue or document, I should say. If you are sourcing electric powered equipment for your building, it's very likely that those products will have some type of criteria that are compliant. So for this credit, you're looking at 40% by cost. So of the total dollar amount of electric powered equipment, 40% must fall into the criteria to the right here. EPEAT rating, and that is an EPA established system. And then the second one is Energy Star. And that is if the equipment does not have EPEAT rating certification, then it must be Energy Star qualified. A lot of those products that would fall into this product category will have perhaps both EPEAT and Energy Star. And then if neither, there must be a phase out plan for non-compliant equipment. So first, seek your EPEAT rating. So first priority, if you can identify products and source products that have this certification. The reason for this is because the EPEAT rating addresses the product's full life cycle. So it uses preferable materials and reduces sensitive materials. It focuses on packaging. So there is packaging criteria to become an EPEAT certified product. And those products are designed for longevity. So how long can that life cycle possibly be? Energy conservation and reducing toxicity. And then only if EPEAT isn't available, you want to look at something that has Energy Star qualification, which just uses less energy overall because of that low power mode, and it reduces utility and operating costs. So it's kind of top tier, second tier, but a lot of times you'll find products that have both. And then lastly, that electric powered equipment phase out plan. You want to be able to service old equipment and avoid unnecessary waste and resource consumption if possible. So if you have, let's say, a copy machine that isn't working, rather than just dump it out the back door, you want to make sure that it's evaluated and improved, perhaps maintained properly, so that you can continue using it. And if the equipment is no good, then you need to have that phase out plan to replace remaining products with compliant equipment at the end of their useful life. There are 3 metrics for exemplary performance in this credit. Definitely remember the exemplary performance percentages for any of your LEED credits. It's definitely something you'll see on the exam. So for ongoing consumables, you'll need 95% compliance, electric powered equipment, 80%, and then food and beverage, 50%. Your adaptation, schools and hospitality will need to purchase at least 25% by cost of total combined food and beverage purchases, meeting those sustainable agriculture guidelines, or locally sourced, which can be pretty tough. All right, moving now to purchasing of lamps. Again, here, there's no establishment component because that was already addressed in the prerequisite. So here we're looking at performance. You want to have a lighting purchasing plan. I will say this credit is very doable. The LED focus in office buildings has increased significantly in the last 2-3 years. So if a building is going through a renovation or perhaps a new build, it's likely that LEDs are the focus for any new type of lighting that is sourced. You want to show an average of 70 picograms of mercury per lumen hour, so that's the unit, picograms per lumen hour or less, for all mercury containing lamps in the project boundary. This includes indoor and outdoor fixtures, as well as your hardwired and portable fixtures. Any lamps that do not have mercury can be counted only if their energy efficiency at least equals that of their mercury containing counterpart. So essentially you're focusing on anything that does have mercury in it. So your LEDs would be excluded here. You can include them if that efficiency is at least equal to the mercury containing counterpart, which for an LED most certainly is. All right, here's the process, and we're going to break this down a little bit more further from here. You want to take an inventory of the lamps that are in place at the building, and then you take metrics for each of those lamps that is installed. The mean lumen output, what the rated life 3-hour instant start is, then the mercury content. And those 3 items go into a calculation where the picogram per lumen hour for each lamp is established. And that's how the overall end product calculation is done. So you're looking at your whole building mercury content. And then where needed, if you need to identify any alternatives, you find, well, this particular lamp has a high mercury content. What can we source that will provide similar light quality, but less mercury? That's where you discuss your alternatives. And you track your purchases during the performance period, your LEED performance period. The process for your inventory is essentially walking the building and gathering information about the lamps that are installed. You may have some really great lamp schedules and plans, so you might have some documentation. However, if it's an older building, there might be more of a challenge to obtain that inventory. So it just depends what's available, what documentation you have available. But that inventory must include lamps in tenant spaces, even if the tenant is responsible for their own lamp procurement. So it's all floors, all spaces. You include lamps in outdoor fixtures and portable task lighting as well. So a task lamp on your desk, for example, would be required to be included. And any type of design documents or relamping records really may help you out there. You want to be looking at the manufacturer, make and model, and the quantity installed. So the number of X type of lamp is important, and then the manufacturer for that lamp, manufacturer, make, model of the lamp is important because you need to be able to find the lumen output, rated life, et cetera, to go into the calculation. This is a little screenshot of what the Lead Online documentation looks like for this particular credit. There is a purchasing calculator, a lamp purchasing calculator. And the calculations by hand, there are two equations, and these are really good to know for your exam, just in case. So the first one is to convert mercury content in milligrams to picograms per lumen hour. So what you'll find if you'll look up, I don't know, you can look up a T8 or a T5, and if you pull up the product information for that lamp, you'll find those measures. So rated life, mean lumens, and mercury. The mercury is going to be in milligrams. So what you're doing with this calculation is you're just translating that mercury content to the unit that USGBC will be using, which is picograms per lumen hour. Second calculation is to calculate the overall picograms per lumen hour for the whole building. And this is total picograms per lumen hour divided by the total number of lamps purchased. Exemplary performance for this credit is at 35 picograms per lumen hour or less. So for the meat of the credit, we were looking at a 70 picogram per lumen hour or less threshold. For exemplary performance, you're going lower, you're going to 35. All right, so for our next credit, we've got purchasing, facility, maintenance, and renovation. Again, there's no establishment because the guidance for this policy was established in the prerequisite. So we're looking at performance, you're looking at products and materials, furniture, or if there's no purchasing, there's an option, a route for documenting as well. For option one, looking at the products and materials, achieving a 50% compliance by cost. So again, total cost of the products that fall into this category for facility maintenance and renovation, 50% or more must be compliant. Recycled content is a really big ticket item here. If you can source products that have recycled content, it can help you achieve the threshold fairly easily, or not easily, but easier, I should say. FSC certified wood products can be sourced and contribute greatly. Any type of material reuse, so anything that has been used before and can be salvaged for reuse at your building. Extended producer responsibility can contribute here as well as certifications for the product like green screen, cradle to cradle, and even reach optimization. 50% by cost here. For supply chain optimization, we're going to be going through each of these four on the lower left. So first, we're focusing on supply chain optimization. That's validated and robust safety, health, and hazard and risk programs documenting at least 99% of the ingredients of a product. So really, we're focusing on material transparency. Is the product manufacturer providing documentation and transparency on the ingredients of that product, what makes up that product? And then you're looking for a third-party verification of chemical ingredients. You want to be able to identify and document the health, safety, environmental hazard, and risk of your chemical ingredients. Optimize health, safety, and environmental impacts when designing and improving ingredients. And then lastly, communicating your chemical ingredient stewardship information along the supply chain and making that publicly available. So for each of these, just really, really focusing on material transparency. Next up, low emissions of VOCs. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. We're seeing it come up again. Low VOC and low emitting products are super important, especially in a facility maintenance and renovation or renovation. You want to focus on products that are either inherently non-emitting, if you can, or if they are emitting, compliant with this California Department of Public Health standard. Remember that standard. For wet applied products, there are different categories of products and what VOC criteria they're compared to. So for wet applied products, your paints and coatings, adhesives and sealants, things like that, we're going to review those. Paints and coatings meet one of these following VOC limits: California Air Resources Board, so CARB, Suggested Control Measure, or SCACMD Rule 1113. And then for adhesives and sealants, you want to comply with the SCACMD Rule 1168. So remember that paints and coatings relates to Rule 1113 SCACMD, and adhesives and sealants relate to 1168 for SCACMD. You all may have seen that one even show up on the LEED Green Associate exam. All right, so now we're looking at low emissions of formaldehyde. Any types of cabinetry or millwork, basically built-in wood products that have composite wood. And composite wood is anything like a plywood or an MDF, anything that has little pieces of wood that are glued together to become a sheet. So that cabinetry and millwork that contains composite wood has to meet CARB requirements for ultra low emitting formaldehyde resin or no added formaldehyde-based resin. Any types of salvaged or reused architectural millwork more than 1 year old at the time of occupancy is considered to be compliant. And the reason for that is because anything that's been reused, it's likely already emitted and it may not be emitting anymore. So that's why that's being prioritized and considered compliant. Location factor. So again, we're looking at that 100-mile threshold. So anything that is sourced, which means it was extracted, it was manufactured and purchased within 100 miles of the building site, is valued double the dollar amount of their contributing cost. So if that product was initially worth $100, that product is worth $200 in your calculations for this credit. Can be very helpful. It can be difficult to find products within that 100-mile limit. It is definitely doable if you put your heart to it. The documentation is important to be thorough, so you need to be able to show where that product was extracted, where it was manufactured and purchased to prove that it was within the 100 miles. This is a good example of what the calculator looks like for the ongoing facility maintenance and renovation purchasing credit goes, and for the WAMP purchasing goes. So all of this information is compiled into one calculator, and where the product has compliant criteria, it's noted, and where it does not have, let's say it does not meet local sourcing, you would just leave that column blank and fill in the areas where that product is relevant. And then the summary calculations show you at the end of the day what your total weighted calculations are in terms of compliance. Here's option 2 for facility maintenance and renovation. We're looking at furniture here. So 75% by cost. So total cost of furniture, 75% of that furniture cost must be compliant with these criteria listed on the left here. Again, recycled content is a big one where you can really increase that percentage. Any FSC certified wood might be the base structure for the furniture. Bio-based materials reuse. If you can actually source reused furniture, that's going to be great for your LEED application. That would be preventing, virgin resources being used, transportation impact, all of that good stuff. All right, option 3, if you have no alterations that occur at the building during your performance period and no furniture purchases, that is a way where you can document this credit and achieve your LEED point. So making no alterations to the project space, no purchase of furniture. You can say we still comply with all of these, the intent of the credit, because you are not introducing a new product into the building. Exemplary performance for this one is 95% for option 1 only. All right, moving forward to solid waste management for ongoing consumables. Performance only. We want to maintain a waste reduction and recycling program that reuses, recycles, or composts the following. And you're seeing a split between your ongoing consumables versus your durable goods. So at least 50% of ongoing waste to be diverted, and then at least 75% of your durable goods diverted. The reason that the percentage for durable goods is higher is because it's easier to recycle those, and you need to recycle them less often. So the likelihood of you being able to recycle a copy machine or something, a TV, is much higher because the facilities are there, and because it occurs less often, it's just more available. Safely dispose of hazardous materials. That is definitely a big component of this credit. So in addition, you want to safely dispose of your discarded batteries, your mercury-containing lamps, and make sure that those are done safely. When it comes to implementation for your waste management policy for ongoing consumables, you want to make sure that there's separate collection of landfill waste and recyclables, no commingled dumpsters if possible. So if everything can be separated between your carpet and your wood, it tends to be cleaner and more easily managed. You want to be able to educate all building occupants. You can have flyers in the break room or on the refrigerators, inform the janitorial staff of that policy so that you can ensure that it is implemented on an ongoing basis. And then when it comes to waste management policy for durable goods, build internal and or external partnerships. So maybe you work with an electronic recycling program or provider, and they come by the building on a monthly basis and collect things. Or perhaps you collect things at the building on an ongoing basis at the loading dock, just in a box, and as that box fills up, that provider is called and they come and empty that box. So the systems and the programs that the vendors offer are pretty advanced and can be tailored to your building needs too. On-site storage for tenant reuse. So perhaps you have an empty tenant suite and another tenant moved out, and you've got all of this furniture that they didn't want, but they didn't really want to take it out of the building. You could store that unused furniture in the empty tenant suite for a future tenant that might come along that needs furniture. So it's a really good way to think about preventing waste from leaving the building if it doesn't need to. And then any nonprofit donations can help with the partnerships as well. All right, track. We want to develop a tracking system. Of course, tracking and performance metrics are very important for documenting these items and managing ongoing consumables in your durable waste stream, durable goods waste stream. So you want to track material quantities in the same unit consistently over your performance period. Where it can get confusing is if you have, let's say, certain things that are tracked in weight and other things that are tracked in volume, and then at the end of the day, you're supposed to combine those to finalize your calculations. It can just be difficult. So it's easier to establish what that unit is at the beginning. Find out whether any tenants contract with waste haulers that recycle materials separately from the building's recycling program. That note is there so that if you know there's a separate waste recycling program going on, you want to make sure that you can have a conversation with that other provider and ensure that your building policies are being continued. Work with waste haulers to ensure that they provide the right information to demonstrate compliance with credit requirements. So you want to speak with your waste vendor early on and say, do you have the sample of recycling reports that you would typically provide so I can take a look at it? And then you want to make sure that once you have that sample report, that it's covering the metrics you need. Is it in the unit that you need, Does it have the material breakdown that you need? So on and so forth. Here's a really great example of a waste recycling report. You can see at the top the different dates. So one haul per month. You've got your pounds in the compactor versus pounds that were recycled. Aluminum was separated here. Your plastic, your paper, your general waste is combined. So you can see the overall net diversion at the bottom right is 34.4%, which is too low for this credit, but it's a good example. If this is a sample report that a vendor provides from a previous month at the building, you know that there's room for improvement before the credit can be earned. Okay, and here's another great example of a tenant improvement construction type of waste report. You've got wet waste on the left, your mixed office waste, and then your glass, metal, plastic, compost. Compost is a great one to see. So this is not construction, this is general facility, and separated by material, which is great. Verify adequate waste diversion during your performance period. So you want to collect data on total waste diverted and total waste disposed for ongoing consumables and durable goods. So you're looking at both of those material streams, ongoing consumables and your durable goods, over your LEED performance period. And the data does need to represent the entire performance period. You can't have like a big gap in the middle of it. And data for how waste leaves the site needs to be consistent with the building's collection categories. Do not include furniture, furnishings, or construction waste from facility maintenance and renovation activities. So that is considered separate from your ongoing consumables, your like curbside recycling program. And then consider requesting haul reports on a regular basis rather than gathering all documentation when the performance period ends. That's a big one. And a lot of vendors will provide those haul reports regardless of whether or not you request for it. But it's good to establish that policy, have those haul reports come in on a regular basis so you can keep track of what the diversion rate is on an ongoing basis. All right, so this is a little screenshot of what it looks like to document your ongoing consumables in LEED Online. So you can see here, you've got your diverted waste description. So what is the material that's being diverted? What is the disposal method? Recycled, salvaged, landfill, hauler or destination, typically a hauler, and then your amount in tons, or maybe it's in a different, maybe it's in pounds, whatever it might be. You can choose from the drop down. 2 narratives need to be provided. So you're looking at the battery recycling and safe storage is implemented, and how your mercury containing lamp recycling and storage is implemented. So further delineating what your process is. Exemplary performance for your solid waste management ongoing. You need 75% of your ongoing consumables diverted, and then 100% of your durable goods diverted for exemplary performance. And with this adaptation for schools, you can exclude food waste if composting is not available or feasible. Composting is more readily available in certain cities than others, so it just depends on the program that you have that's local to you.
So our last materials and resource credit is solid waste management, facility maintenance, and renovation. So as you may have realized, the purchasing credits all have corresponding waste credits. So Monica went over purchasing for if you have any facility maintenance or renovation done on site for your existing building. And so for this credit, in the establishment, there's none. That goes into that policy that we talked about as the prerequisite. And so for the performance period, we want to see 70% of that waste diverted, either by weight or volume. Sometimes, you know, it depends on how you calculate your waste. So it's up to you whether you want to use weight or volume. And you want to divert the waste from landfills and incinerators. So anything that might pose a human health concern, for example, if it has mold in it, or if it's not considered base building. Monica went over some of those base building elements, but if it's mechanical, electrical, or plumbing, or if it's a specialty item, then you don't have to worry about the disposal of those elements. So 70% is what you want to keep in mind with base building elements. So anything that makes up the buildings permanently, semi-permanently installed, we would count as this needs to be diverted when we do our renovation. So structures, wall studs, insulation, doors and windows, carpet, trim, sealants, paint, those we all want to see get diverted for this credit. And so for the renovation activities, we talked a little bit about the policy. Now, we want to make sure to adapt the policy as needed for whatever work is being done on site. So use the prerequisite plan as a guideline, as kind of your starting point, and then adapt it to fit the schedule. So if you're renovating, maybe an amenities floor, or you're just renovating offices, that might be different material used on those floors that you can try and divert. Now, so those tailored strategies are going to be the best, and we want to kind of keep transparency between our workers, the demolition scope, make sure that everyone on site knows here's our goal. And so we want to, train the workers, the subcontractors, and the recycling protocols, make sure that everyone knows how we're recycling items, to where it goes, so that we don't have any confusion, so that we don't lose any percentages from recycling. And then another thing to consider would be a quality control program, so that we can document that the facility maintenance and renovation waste is sorted properly and being monitored correctly. So again, unlikely you'll see a question like this. This is just a good real world how-to make sure that if you're going for this point, you're able to achieve it. And exemplary performance would be 95%. So this would be when you get that additional bonus point. So good things to remember from this credit are create that detailed plan, and the percentage we want to hit for 1 point, and the percentage for the exemplary performance. This credit is very similar to the other waste credits, very straightforward. And so this construction, demolition, waste recycling, encourages regional recycling industries. So this credit is just kind of great looking towards the future, looking how you keep your building green. So this was our last materials and resource credit. Looking at the synergies like we do before, another good synergy, materials and resources is kind of almost its own little bubble. You're looking at what comes into the building, what comes out. But a good synergy to think about for this credit is lamps and energy performance. We talk about, high performing lamps, that's less energy your building has to use. So that's a good link to think about between materials and energy.